Christian Village Church in Forked River. And we've been greeting a visitor we have from Charlottesville, Virginia. Her name is Janaki Lassard. And I'm going to ask her to come up again. And this is her second. She drove all the way from Charlottesville, Virginia, just to be here with everybody. And Joan, Mark, you want to raise your hand, Mark, so she knows Mark has given a little gift. Maybe you could come up and open it up.
Why should she?
Because I'm holding this, just because I said so, that's why. But, yeah, and open it up. It's
No, I'm not going to open it. It is for you. You will.
Johnny Key. That's close enough.
You should have more come up.
Okay, what are you expecting? You know? What's it say?
It said, small token of friendship, love and peace, the church.
Thank you, Mark. Well, why don't you open it and show it to everybody? And
Very nice.
That's nice.
That's wonderful. I didn't realize you had T-shirts.
well, we don't, Mark.
That's great.
Okay.
Very good. Nice.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Here's your bag, and all right, get out. That's the end of that. Okay. I never know. Maybe Tuesday night she'll get something else. You know, she had a cake today, and we gave her some tapes, and she has a T-shirt. I mean, that's not bad. I mean, you know, we're not Jim Baker yet. We can get a free weekend at the Heritage Hotel or something like that. We do the best we can. She got the tapes. I gave her the tapes. So. Okay, what we're going to do tonight is in the Old Testament, and we're going to tell the story of the wrestling match that changed the world. And the story involves a biblical character that you all know, and whoa, okay, I just want to see if this is going to work. By the name of Jacob. Okay, don't like this one. Jacob is really us. He's very much like us in every respect. And you have to forget about a person by the name of Jacob actually living. Whether he did or he didn't, that's not relevant. The point is, what does he represent inside of you? Because every biblical character represents an aspect of you, your personality, your brain, the electrical fields in your body, your mind, and so forth like that. But this guy was not a saint, and just the opposite. He was a very jealous kind of guy. He was selfish. He made lots of mistakes, and just like all of us did. And basically, that's what the story is trying to point out, that within each one of us is the ability to become something that we can't really see now. But in spite of all of his shortcomings, and just like all of us, he always had a desire for higher things. He had a desire for what we would call God things, for lack of a better word. And he was never really comfortable when he got too separated from this thing we call God. However you want to recite it. It doesn't necessarily bear itself out as a church or a religious type of thing, because that didn't exist in the context of the story as it was written then. These were desert people, But what he did basically was refused to face up to the truth, lied to himself, tried to make everything come out to the best that he could, but still in all, he wasn't happy. He made many mistakes, but he prayed much. Basically, I guess you could say, when he wasn't doing wrong, he was praying. And that's basically what we do too, So he represents the average human being in every way. Not that many virtues and a lot of things that you'd say he should have changed. One of the things he did, he took advantage of his brother in the story. And in the story, his brother's name is Esau. E-S-A-U. And Jacob took advantage of him. He did. He connived with his mother, and he stole the blessing that belonged to Esau. I don't know if you remember hearing the story, but as we go along, you'll understand why this happens and why this worked out the way it did. But as the prodigal son, he was drawn home, I mean, what he really did, he connived and he stole from Esau, but he was drawn to go back home, and he was really afraid of going back home because Esau was waiting with all of his mighty armies, and Jacob figures, boy, when I get back, am I going to get it, And this is basically the nature of the story, but it takes on a great metaphysical and a mystical basis when we begin to learn it, see? Because as Jacob begins the return trip back home to confront Esau, he's filled with fear. He's filled with apprehension. He really wants to do this, but he doesn't know how, and he knows that he's got to have a reconciliation, but he's afraid. And basically, it's the same thing that we all go through as we try to reconcile ourselves and with others, and of course, basically with spirit. So he had a guilty conscience, and he was carrying this guilty conscience around for years. Now, what these two represent is quite surprising when you look at it mystically. Here's the guy that did all the conniving. Here's the guy that really stole the blessing. And Jacob represents the spirit. Esau represents that which is the mind, the flesh, the carnal mind. I mean, if you were to take this out of the context of a story and put it into what it really is, as Paul said, an allegory, you'll understand that this is the part of you, the spiritual part of you, which is struggling to find its way back home, struggling to find its way to higher things, and this is the part of you that is consumed with the things around you, the material things around you, the physical things around you. So we have nothing more than the spirit and the mind represented in this story by Jacob and Esau. Not really two people named Jacob and Esau, but a story using them as representatives of aspects of your spirit and your mind. Okay? And that's where we start from. And you might say, that's really strange because Jacob was selfish and dishonest. He was a coward, see? And that's the point. That within each one of us is this. No matter what we are, no matter how bad we are, no matter how wicked we may pretend to be, inside of every one of us is this magnificence. Inside of every one of us is the spirit. Because if we were to say, this was a wonder person of high credentials, this person never did anything wrong, this person, well, then it would exclude all of us. And, you know, what part could we play in it? So remember, you're looking at an allegory when you look in biblical things, and the Bible, in its way, in the ancient lessons, is simply saying that that which is spirit dwells within that which is totally human, totally common, totally screwed up in many instances, okay? But our nature that can be redeemed is indeed Jacob. Esau, the word Esau means red. That's what it means. The red earth. He stands for the material. He was rough, not necessarily a bad guy. I mean, he's the kind of guy that you knew where you stood. I mean, he'd punch you in the nose as soon as look at you, but you know why. I mean, he didn't mince any words. But this word red is an interesting word because it is aligned in the Bible with the emotions, always the emotions. You see the Red Sea, the churning Red Sea. Well, it's not a real Red Sea, although there is one. It's used as an allegorical symbol for the emotions. It blocks your pathway to nirvana. It blocks your pathway to God. And so therefore you come to this churning Red Sea, and all of your thoughts are crashing down behind you, ready to take you captive back into the carnal aspects of your mind. But then when you look up, a way is made across the churning emotions to the promised land. That's what this is all about. Okay. And that word red signifies, just like the red horse, it signifies the emotional nature, the nature of the mind, the very human nature. So why you see, and coming up is Halloween, you'll see a lot of kids going out and they're dressed in a devil's costume, and the costume is always red and has horns, because what that is very important. The word red symbolizes the emotions, the horns symbolize the power, and the devil actually portrayed in a red suit with horns symbolizes the power of the emotions. Okay? And that's basically is going real way back into metaphysical symbolisms of books that predate the Bible. So the mystical message begins, and let's take a look at it and follow this adventure, and then follow this between each one of us as this encounter between Jacob and Esau takes place. But the encounter between Jacob and Esau is actually the encounter between the spirit and the mind. And let's see what happens. Let's go to page 20 in your little Bibles. And we'll look at the book of Genesis, and we'll go to Genesis chapter 25. Genesis chapter 25, way back in the Old Testament, and we're going to look at verse 25. And here is Rebekah is about to give birth to the twins, right? And now watch it and read it with me, and let's see something interesting. And the first came out, this is she's giving birth, the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. Okay? Now, there is the symbol that the lower part of our nature, that which is close to the earth, that which is the human part, shall be redeemed by the higher part. In the Bible, okay? Remember when Jesus used to wash the feet of the disciples? The foot is always considered that part because it touches the earth. It has to be cleansed. Anything that touches the earth mystically in the Bible is that which touches the mind. So Jesus' foot washing has nothing to do with a human foot. It has to do with cleansing away that part of you which touches the lower. The higher mind will cleanse away your mind because it has taken into itself all that comes from the lower. That's what foot washing means. In this particular aspect here, the heel represents that part of us which touches the carnal mind, okay? And so here comes spirit, which always comes after the physical. That which is born first is the physical, that which is born second is spirit. Spirit then touches the heel as a symbol that that part of us which touches the lower part, the carnal part of the mind, shall be redeemed by that part which is spirit. All right? That's exactly, see, when you look in there, this is what's so much of a problem with so much of Christian Bible reading. You'll read that and say, oh, that was really some birth. One kid's coming out hanging on to the other one, you know, and they drag him out. And that's not, it's never happened. It didn't happen. This is an allegorical statement. It's a metaphysical statement. It's a mystical statement saying that the physical, the mind, that which is the physical, always comes first. Then spirit comes second. And in this particular instance, the heel being the part representative as that which touches the earth must be cleansed. That which touches the mind must be cleansed, and it will be cleansed by that which is the spirit. Okay? And so there we have that. Now, if you look at something, go back to page 3 in the Bible, and if you look at Genesis chapter 3, okay? Genesis chapter 3, you'll see a reference to this. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. And I will put enmity between you, that's the serpent, that's the lower mind, and the woman, that's the human spirit. Now, a lot of people think it means the Virgin Mary. Well, it means the Virgin Mary, okay. But mystically, as part of the consciousness, the woman represents the spirit within you. The woman is the spirit part of God, okay? I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed, which is the seed of the lower mind, and her seed. It shall bruise your head. In other words, her seed, that which is spirit, shall bruise your head. How does spirit bruise the head? Spirit bruises the head by coming against the carnal mind. Okay? But look what happens here. But you shall bruise his heel. Those things that we encounter in our touching of the lower mind cause us pain. See? Every time we touch the carnal mind, we come up with some kind of pain, some kind of difficulty. But in the end, the victory will be against the head of that which is the serpent, which means that the spirit will do its work in consciousness. That's why when David slays Goliath, the wound is to the head, to the forehead of Goliath. It's all a play on words meaning the same story. Okay. So our physical nature suffers because of all of the things, whether it be sickness or depressions or whatever it will be. But eventually, because we overwhelm by the power of consciousness through spirit, we will be victorious. And that's what's being said here. Jesus crushed the carnal totally, but his physical nature was bruised and hurt. And that's what you're seeing here. So Esau, whose weakness was the love of material things, I mean, look what he did. He sacrificed his blessing for the material. Okay? That's what all of us have done at one time or another. Doesn't mean you gave up church to go to a movie. That's not what I'm talking about. In other words, we have sacrificed this inner knowledge, this wisdom that comes from within in order to be comfortable in the traditional values of our religions or of our society, of our system, whatever you want to say. So he stands for that human carnal mind, that lower nature. But Jacob, with all his faults, is a spiritual person, and the higher nature grabs hold of that which is the lower nature and says, I won't let you go. I'll pull you out of this. I'll make things right. See, and if we wanted to put this in the context of you physically, there's the left side, the carnal side, the 10%, which is the carnal side of the brain, and there's the right side, the 90%, which is the divine side. So then the left side would be the Esau side, the right side would be the Jacob of the spirit side, and the Jacob of the spirit side says, we're born together. Yes, you come first, you're the physical, but you're in a mess, you're in trouble, and that part of you that touches the mind will make you be sick, but I will hold on to you, and I will save you. I will see that you're redeemed, and I will cleanse that part of you that touches the lower mind. In other words, I will make a way through all of those terrible thoughts, all of that screaming that goes on in your mind. I will make a way in all of those conflicts that you have with others, your family, or whomever. And Jacob had an experience similar to us. He was set free, as Jesus said that you'll be set free, because he had an experience. In other words, see, it's just like you and I. We have the Spirit within us, but what good is it? I mean, I went for 40 some odd years before I ever discovered this. I went through all the motions. I went to different churches. I went to the fundamental churches. I went through all the things. I didn't know this, but yet it was there. That same Spirit that is teaching these things now and sharing these things for you now, at one time was held totally captive. It was like in a little box. Only because of the movement that came through the higher realms. When I used to go and Joan would be out cooking, I'd go into the room and put on a record by Wagner or Tchaikovsky or Mendelssohn or Handel or some of these great, and then I would be taken into heights, and I'd come out after her like I had a meditation. I didn't even know it was a meditation. And I'd say something to her, and we'd both say, I wonder if anybody else ever thinks of that. Do you remember that? Say, remember I used to say, to you, why do I think these things? What's going on? And it always happened when I was listening to this classical music. Something went on. See? And it was the Jacob who was in bondage. It was the Jacob in this story. You know, he had really tried everything, but yet he was totally consumed with himself and all the material things. But there was something yearning to break forth, something yearning to become free, something yearning to rise to a different plateau, a different realm than he was in. See, because no one in the whole Bible changed so radically as did Jacob in the story. And no one in the whole world, really, if you look at it, has changed so radically as you've changed. As you've changed. As all of you sitting in this room have changed radically from where you were, because it wasn't too long ago you were standing in some church staring straight ahead as they were singing Amazing Grace, or people were doing that, or reading from the 5th chapter of this and telling you to sit down and stand up and give this, and then all of a sudden it's all gone. And now you don't even read this literally. You start to question all of this stuff literally, because you're looking at things written behind the words. All different things. You're going into situations of the people of the East in which you're chanting Myoho Renge Kyo, you're chanting Om. What happened to you? You had a radical change. Bang! He had a radical change. Completely differentiated from anything that he was. Excuse me. Do you know what I'm telling you? Because that's what you're here for. And this is the part that's interesting, because exactly what he does, you did. Oh, this story is, you didn't know he did the same thing you did, but he did. See? In other words, you followed his story exactly. You did exactly what he did in order to confront that which is the physical part of you. You did exactly what he did. And I'm going to show you that. It's really interesting. So Jacob is a lesson for people to see what will happen. There's not a fault that you have that he didn't have. There's not a weakness that you have to overcome that he didn't have to overcome. So let's look at something first. First of all, we'll go into the symbolisms of the story. Take a look at page 28, Genesis 32. Page 38, Genesis 32. It said that Jacob had gone into the far country, just like the prodigal son. It says in Genesis 32, verse 9, here, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, and Lord, return unto your country. The Lord said unto me, don't you see what it's saying there? Look what's being said. What the Lord said to Jacob, Jacob, return unto your country and to your kindred, and I will deal well with you. Hasn't he said that to you? Huh? Your country's to the east. Your country's to the right side. And he's saying here, oh, Jacob, Jonathan, Joan, Ethel, Al, return back unto your country, to your kindred. In other words, back to that which is your true kindred of spirit, that which back to your true kindred, that which is God, and I will deal well with you. Come out of the far country of the left side. Come back home to the right side. Come back. That's why Jesus said, cast your net to the right side. Come back to the house. Return unto the country. And that's, you know, it's the same thing. What happened? The prodigal son was coming back devastated. Do you remember? The prodigal son didn't have anything, and he was coming back from the far country. Jacob was rich. He had everything. But what's the difference? They're both coming back. Huh? Doesn't make... See the point that's made here? Jacob's coming back loaded down, wealthy, rich. He had all of the material things. Prodigal son didn't have anything, but they both had to come back from the far country. It's easy to come back when you're the prodigal son. Huh? I mean, you're in the gutter. Here you're sitting in the gutter. Hey, you know, the slop is flow. What have I got to lose? Come back, son. You ain't kidding, I'm coming back. It's easy to come back when you're the prodigal son. You don't have anything. But Jacob had everything. Huh? Jacob had everything. Women all over the place. Goats. Yeah, I wouldn't get it. But in those days, it was a big deal. See, so in other words, the story saying when you've got your hand on everything and you're rich with all of this stuff, it's hard to get some guy to say, oh, come back to the Spirit. Come on, I'm having a... Nothing's go-. Because what do you usually think of? When everything's going right, God's blessing you. Right? That's what we do. We sit down and we say thanks. Coming up Thanksgiving, November. Oh, God. This big, fat, dead bird laying in the middle of the table. Oh, God. Thank you for this dead bird with a hole in the thing with all the stuff shut. Thank you. Thank you for this. Oh, God. Hey, and he says, you know, I said, who knows? I mean, you know, oh, God. Thank you for giving it to me. You didn't give it to those people down the street. They don't have fakakta down there. Who cares? Just to say, so because you got it, you think you're blessed. You're not going to change. But the story is here, he had everything. He had turkeys all over the place. He still came back. Huh? He still came back. So both of them come back. And in Genesis 32:10, look what he says. I am not worthy. The humility. Look at page 851 in your Bible. Keep your finger where you're at. But look at page 851 and go to Luke 15 to the prodigal son and see what the prodigal son says. Verse 18. Look what he says in verse 18, the prodigal son, I will go where? I will arise and go to my father. In other words, I will lift myself up to the Father's house. My friends, the Father's house is your head. Get it straight. The Father's house is your brain. That's why Jesus says, when you have seen me, you have seen the Father. You nudnik, because it's here. See? The Father's house, whenever it says in the Bible, I will rise and go to the Father's house. When you come in here on Tuesday night, you know what you're doing? You are saying, I am going to rise and go to the Father's house. Because that's where you go, the Father's house. But now it's so as we enter into the age of Aquarius, the Father's and Mother's house. Rise up into the holy place. And so here it says in Luke 15, verse 19, and I am no more worthy to be called your son. So the humbleness that each expresses, the beggar, the prodigal son, and the rich man, Jacob, oh, when you return to the Father's house, it's all even. But everybody's got to go. Now, and let me tell you something. Don't tell me, because I know when you're in trouble, you come here. I don't mean you. I'm not pointing at. I'm just saying the collective you, general you. When people are in trouble, they all come here to go to the Father's house. But when things are going good, you're too busy to come here to go to the Father's house. You know what I'm saying? This is what's being pointed out here. Jacob had broken that. But what did Jacob do? What thoughts come to us? What do we do? You have a situation and say, well, you know, you got something coming up. Think of what it might be. It might be a foreclosure. It might be an illness. It might be a business problem. It might be a marital problem. It could be any one of a million things. What do? Do you come in and go to the Father's house? Do you give it up and do you rise up into the Father's house? Look at Genesis 32 where you are. Jacob did exactly what we all do because that's what the story's about. It's what we do. Genesis 32, verse 10, and we'll go all the way up to verse 19. Look, verse 11. Deliver me from the hand of my brother Esau, for I fear him. You said, I will surely do you good and make your seed as the sand of the sea. And he lodged there that same night and took of that which came a present for his brother. 200 goats. I'm in verse 14. 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, 15, 30 milch camels. He delivered them unto the hands of the servants. Verse 17. And he commanded, when my brother comes and asks me who you are, go and say, who are these before thee? Then you shall say, and so he commanded a second and third, and all the followed the droves in verse 19. What's he doing? He's beginning to arrange all of his affairs. He's trying to make something work. He's trying to figure a way out himself. This is what I'll do. Yeah? I'll give him these goats. He's a sucker for goats. This guy loves goats. He ain't going to bother me if I give him the goats. There's one goat he always... You see, what is the first thing you do? The first thing all of us do, knee-jerk reaction, we try to make things right ourselves. We try to work them out ourselves. And that's exactly what he did. He began to arrange all of the outer affairs. See, it's not a person that lived. It's not a person that existed. It's you and me. And the Bible here, this ancient document written thousands of years ago, and it's going to culminate in a magnificent tale of what happens to you. But you and me do the same thing. The first thing we do, instead of going to the Father's house, is we try to figure a way out ourselves. That's the key mistake. But we do that. He tried to do something to appease his brother. You got to understand what's going to happen here. Esau is going to come this way. Jacob is going to come this way. And there's going to be a brawl. Huh? And Jacob knows, man, this guy's tough. So what's he going to do? Instead of going for divine direction, he turns and says, I'll buy him off. I'll give him a present. I'll give him a T-shirt, anything. You know, what the heck? I gotta think of something in order to get myself out of this problem. So we write letters, we make phone calls, we run around trying to work things out, going deep. And I do it all the time. I mean, do it all in church and all the church. It's always on a phone. You know, I'm on a phone with Frank Lafferty. What do you think? What'd they say? Well, what if we do this and what if we do that? We don't stop and go into this Holy Father's house. Instead, we just try to make a way. That's what we do. That's what we do, and that's what he did here. But look what happens. Watch this now. You come with me. Here's where we get to the dramatic part of this. Genesis 32, okay? Verse 42. And he rose up that night. He took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants, and his 11 sons passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had. You see what he did? He set across the river during the darkest depression, the night of his soul. He finally let go of everything that he owned. And he stayed alone. He let go of everything. He took not one thing with him. Here he was 1 minute ago consumed, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'll try to figure it this way, I'll try to figure it that way. And then next you hear he says, I am going to take everything that I have and send it over to the other side, and I'm going to stay all by myself. When you come in here to meditate, you are taking everything, all of your plans, all of your dreams, all of your ideas, all of your techniques, everything, all of your religion, and you're sending it over to the other side. And you say, I'm going to stay here in the dark time of my soul, alone. Huh? So, that's why Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit. Huh? I always thought, wow, you were supposed to be spiritually rich. You're supposed to be filled with the Spirit. You're supposed to be a spiritual giant. Jesus Christ comes along and says, blessed are the poor in spirit. In other words, let it cool down. Forget that your spirit and just allow it to float away and be nothing. Be nothing, be the least, be absolute nothingness. Blessed are the poor in spirit. And then there's another part that's interesting. When Jacob sent everything that he had, everyone he trusted, the wives and the ladies and all of his servants, you know what it's saying to you? There is nobody in the world that's going to watch with you. You're going to have to be alone. Do you remember what Jesus in the garden, what did he say? Couldn't you guys watch with me 1 hour? Because there is nobody that will watch with you. People will say, oh, look, this is what you should do. You know, and they're more screwed up than you are. And when they get back, you're out of sight, out of mind. But in the real essence of what is being taught is that you come to that point in your life when you come to the dark time of your soul. The only one that knows the way out resides here. And you have to send everything you've got to the other side. You got to let it all go. You got to let it all go. It was a Gethsemane. And look what it says in verse 24. And Jacob was left alone. Don't you understand? He had thousands of servants, thousands of animals, a whole tribe of people with him, all of this entourage. This was a caravan with all of the camels and goats and all of this stuff. And then in the dark time of his soul, on the verge of a magnificent entrance into nirvana, it says, Jacob was left alone. That's what's got to happen. You got a problem? Think of what it is. Think of what the problem is. Maybe it's a health problem. Maybe it's whatever the kind of problem it is. I got a news for you. Lorraine's got to be left alone. Al's got to be left alone. Janet's got to be left alone. Dave's got to be left alone. Johnny's got to be left alone. Everyone sitting in this room, if you're going to have that problem of yours eliminated and you're going to be raised into the confidence of a new life, you've got to send forth everything that you've got, everything that you've thought, everything that you've ever been taught, and you got to send it to the other side and wait alone. And then what happens? Look what it says in verse 24. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. At first it says a man wrestled with him. What's it mean? Who was the man? Do you know that there are people in religious circles who will tell you who the man was? Oh, this was Jesus. This was God. The man was himself. Have you ever been left alone in a crisis of your life and wrestled with the man, wrestled with the mind? Man in the Bible always means mind. When you're left alone on the verge of either a miracle or a disaster, you're going to wrestle with yourself. What am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to lose everything. I don't want to run into him. I don't think of what it is within yourself that causes you to wrestle with yourself. And it's going to happen. Once you get by yourself, the wrestling match will begin. Once you get by yourself, and you know what? Nobody will ever understand it. And they'll all give you advice as to what to do. But watch what happened. As he wrestled with himself, alone in the darkness means a time of deep despair. But look at verse 25. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him. This is talking about the aspect of the mind or God, whatever you want. He touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint. The thigh is a symbol of desire. Huh? Look, let me show you something. Go to chapter 24 of the book of Genesis. I want to show you something. Okay? Chapter 24. And in chapter 24, okay, look at verse 2. John, what page is it on? Well, you can find chapter 24. Look at verse 2. You with me here? And Abraham said unto his servant that ruled over all, put, I pray thee, your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear. You know what that is? Huh? That's what they used to do. They used to put the hand over the male sexual organ. Now you put it over your heart. But in those days, they put it on the male sexual organ. And they would then give a witness. They would swear. And that, if you look up the word testy in the dictionary, it means the male sexual organ, which is the root of the word testicle. But it also means to give witness. Testimony, testify. Huh? And the thigh is the area of desire, of control, okay? It's not, so it's always used as a symbol for desire. Because sexual desire is located there, but it has far-reaching impact when you talk in the realms of mystical, biblical statement. So here then, the thigh is put out, see? What happens here? You're wrestling with yourself. You're trying to figure a way out of it. You've set across everything that you own, but you still have a desire. You know, you're in here in meditation, and you're coming into this dark, holy place, but you want something to happen. You're trying to make something to happen. You want something to come out this particular way. But this was the thing. Until all of Jacob's human desires were put out, until they were dealt with and disabled, his struggle would always be with himself, and God could not enter. Do you see? You're always going to struggle with yourself until the desires to have things the way you want them to come are put out. And they can only be put out by the man who wrestles with it. Huh? When the desires of the mind to have our way are stricken, then we are forced to be still. Why? What is it talking about? He put out the hollow of his thigh. Don't you understand? He could no longer stand on his own human desires. They wouldn't hold him up anymore. So he collapsed at the foot of God. Huh? Because he couldn't stand. See? Be still, it says. Come in, be still. Let's do a little Bible skip in just a few things. Page 597, the book of Isaiah. Page 597. The book of Isaiah, Isaiah chapter 30. Isaiah chapter 30, page 597, verse 7. For the Egyptians shall help in vain and to no purpose. Therefore have I cried concerning this. Their strength is to sit still. See? Your strength is to sit still. You're on Isaiah 30? Go to verse 21. And your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way. Walk in it when you turn to the right and when you turn to the left. Be still so you can hear. Be still. Go to page 464. Page 464 to the book of Psalms. Psalm chapter 4 and verse 4. Stand in awe and sin not. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. Selah. One last one, page 59. Exodus 14. Moses is in a confrontation. In Exodus 14, Moses says to the people, because they were frightened, forget the story, it's you, when you're frightened, the armies are coming against them, the thoughts are coming against you, problems are coming against you. In verse 14, the Lord shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Huh? The Lord shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Be still. Selah. When the man hit and crippled the worldly desires of Jacob, Jacob asked for a blessing. You see what's happening? You're no longer afraid of all of the crap that you had to live under all of your life. Suddenly, the desire to have the things and have the way that you used to have is gone. The fear with it is gone. And now you come into the culmination of where you have been. Verse 27, Genesis 32, page 28. And the man said unto him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, your name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For now you have power with God, and with men you have prevailed. And your name is Israel. Isis, the spirit, Ra, the mind, have come into a communion and produced El, that which is the power of the God within. No, Jacob, you are no longer Jacob. You are now Israel, because spirit and mind have become one. Something happened. I'm not the same person I used to be. I don't think the way I used to think. I don't feel the way I used to feel. I'm not afraid the way I used to be afraid. I don't have to dread the things because something has come upon me in a very strange and mystical place. I wrestled and I wrestled and I wrestled. I set everything I had to the other side. And finally, when it was given to me that my desires were drenched and flushed away, I was laid pure in that nirvanic bliss of nothingness, and my name was changed to Israel. Go to verse 29. Jacob said, what is your name? And he says, what do you ask after my name? Wasn't important, was it? It's not important who. It's not important what God's name is. It's not important whether you call him Jesus or Zeus or whatever you call him. What's important is, what is your name? What's important is your name isn't Jonathan. Your name isn't Joan. Your name isn't Ethel. Your name isn't Dave. Your name is Israel. Because you are standing in favor with God, and because you now have power with men. Because you have gone into the holy place and you have fought the fight within yourself and you have wrestled yourself, and finally your desires were put out and everything was sent to the underside, and in that divine nothingness you have prevailed and be called Israel. And it says in verse 30, and Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face. And you have a Peniel within you. And everybody has a Peniel within them. And everyone who will wrestle that fight and cast their desires to the other side will then enter into that beautiful place of Peniel and see God face to face, and your name will be changed to Israel, and you will be the son and the daughter of God who dwells in the promised land. Look at verse 31. What happened? As he passed over Peniel, well, I've changed a little bit the spelling, but don't worry about that. Look what happened. As he passed over this place of Peniel, the sun rose upon him. He became enlightened. I can see. I am no longer blind. I am standing in the light of Peniel. And it says, and he halted upon his thigh. He no longer could depend on his desires. He no longer had to depend on his desires because the sun shone down upon him in the enlightenment of Peniel. Single eye. If your eye be single, your body will fill with light. And the next time you see a Hindu with a dot in the middle of their forehead, understand what it means and say, Peniel. Well, here we get to the bottom of the story. Genesis 33, verse 1. And Jacob looked up, lifted his eyes, And behold, here comes Esau, and with him 400 men. And in verse 3 it says, and Jacob passed over before all of his, and he bowed to the ground 7 times. Huh? Why? Because he had climbed the 7th chakra of Sabbath and become Israel. And in verse 4 it says, and Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. This is the last scripture you'll have to look up. I want you to see it. Go to page 851. Luke chapter 15. It's the prodigal son again. Verse 12. Verse 20, excuse me, forget 12. And he arose and came to his father's house, but when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, had compassion, ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. Why? Because the neck, mystically, is a bridge between the physical and the divine. And there, mystically, is where the energy rises through the 6 chakras up to the pineal. It is that which joins the matter to the spirit. It is that which carries the tabernacle. It is God's private place. And Jacob lived happily ever after. Quite a conflict, but not something that you have not done. Many of you have done the same thing. And it's the only possible way that Israel can be free. It's the only possible way that there can be an Israel. It's the only possible way that you can come to grips with whatever chases after you and trust 100% as he did. Once you stop battling it, once you give it up and enter into the nothingness, once the struggle with yourself stops and all of your desires change to have it from your way to the way that the divine architect will shape it, once that happens, then your name will be changed. And as it says in the book of Revelation, there is a new name written down in glory for you. And it is Israel. Spirit, mind manifesting in you. Thank you very much.